Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Today, we build a special kind of library, the library of everything that did not fit, the shadow that tells us where our light truly ends. This is part 55. And what we do here is one of the most mature moves a civilization can make. We institutionalize the memory of failure and mystery. We build the counterexample and anomaly registry, also called the shadow archive. An archive can sound boring, like dust and boxes. But this is not paperwork. This is survival. This is intellectual honesty turned into infrastructure. Because without a shadow archive, science becomes like a man who only tells you the days he won and never speaks of the days he lost. He looks invincible, but you are not seeing reality. You are seeing a highlight reel. And highlight reels are exactly how theories turn into myths. A theory becomes a myth when we keep only what supports it and quietly forget what contradicts it. So today, we stop that forgetting. We do not merely encourage honesty. We design the method so that forgetting becomes difficult, costly, and visible. To feel the problem, imagine you are learning to drive. Your instructor praises every good move. Good signal, good stop, good mirror check. You feel confident. Then you drive alone and you crash because nobody ever recorded your near misses in a structured way. Nobody mapped the corners where you panic, the speeds where you misjudge distance, the moments your attention drifts. Now imagine an instructor who says, I am not impressed by your perfect moments. I want to see the moments you almost crashed. I want to train those. That instructor is strict, but he builds the real driver, the one who survives the road. Science is the same. Most human systems reward success. Publish the results that work. Show the plots that support your claim. Hide the messy failures in a folder called noise. This can happen even when people are sincere, because human memory filters. We forget what embarrassed us. We forget what did not lead anywhere. We compress the world into a story that makes us look competent. But reality does not care about our competent stories. Reality cares about what is true. The shadow archive is the civilization's way of saying, we refuse to let human psychology edit the universe. Here is the core question of this part, in plain language. How do we prevent the convenient forgetting of what does not fit? If we do not solve this, everything else becomes fragile. You can have elegant equations. You can have clean rule identities, lineage tracking, certification labels, and formal archives. But if failures are hidden, the entire knowledge system becomes biased. It becomes optimistic. It becomes overconfident. And overconfidence is the most dangerous kind of ignorance because it makes people take risks while believing they are safe. So we establish an institutional rule. Every licensed grammar must come with a paired shadow archive. Not optional, not if you have time, mandatory. An empty shadow does not mean a rule is perfect. It usually means nobody pushed it hard enough, or the failures were quietly filed away, or the tests were gentle. A rule that is used in the world will meet resistance at its boundaries. The world is diverse, messy, and full of edge cases. If you push a rule, it will creak somewhere. That creak is precious because it tells you where the rule stops being reality and starts being approximation. So what is the shadow archive simply? It is a public, structured list of counterexamples, anomalies, near misses, failed predictions, unexplained observations at the edges, and moments where omega, kappa, and nu cannot be made coherent under a proposed grammar. It is the negative ledger. It is the place where we store the stubborn sentences of phi that refuse to obey. If the main registry is the shelf of what works, the shadow archive is the shelf of what does not. And the honest picture of science is the combination of both, the bright map and the dark coastline. Now listen carefully, because this idea changes how you see every claim. There is a deep logical error called survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is what happens when you only look at survivors and forget the dead. It is like studying only the airplanes that returned from battle and reinforcing the parts that look damaged while forgetting the planes that never returned, the ones hit in different places and lost. If you only study survivors, you reinforce the wrong areas and you learn the wrong lesson. Science can do the same. We study only the experiments that worked, the datasets that fit, the systems that behaved cleanly, and we forget the messy ones. Over time, a grammar looks universal, not because it is, but because we remove the evidence that would have revealed its limits. That is how a rule becomes a religion, and Holophase refuses religion. Holophase demands that grammars remain tools, bounded by evidence. So we return to our axiom. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. But surviving falsification is meaningless if falsification attempts are not recorded. If you only publish your victories, of course you survive. That is not survival. That is selective reporting. The shadow archive is the permanent public record of falsification attempts. It is not a trash bin. It is the honest battlefield map. It is where the method keeps its scars, so it cannot pretend it never bled. Now we make the mechanism operational. Every rule in the registry has a stable identity, a rule ID. Every rule ID must have a linked shadow archive. That means whenever you open a rules entry, you also see its shadow. You cannot read the rule without also seeing where it fails, where it strains, and where it is still uncertain. This single design choice changes the culture from defend the rule to understand the boundary. It trains a whole civilization to ask the adult question: where does this tool stop being safe? Now, each entry in the shadow archive is not a vague sentence like, sometimes it didn't work. Each entry must be a structured anomaly report. Think of a medical case file. If a patient has a strange symptom, you do not write pain happens. You write location, timing, intensity, triggers, measurements, and what was tried. You record history because future decisions depend on it. An anomaly report is the same. It contains, at minimum, first, the anomalous phi sentence or dataset, what was observed inside the licensed window with the measurement context recorded. Second, the specific prediction of the rule that failed, what the grammar expected and what refused to happen. Third, the size of the discrepancy, how far off it was. Fourth, the significance, whether this is beyond stated uncertainty, beyond instrument drift, beyond known noise. Fifth, the tri-unity classification, whether the failure begins in omega, in kappa, in nu, or in their joint coherence. Sixth, attempted explanations. What corrections were tried, what alternative causes were tested, what was ruled out. Seventh, status. Unresolved, resolved within the current grammar, or reassigned to a different grammar family. Eighth, links. Connections to other anomaly reports, to rule lineage updates, and to related rules. Now comes the heart of the Holophase diagnostic, tri-unity classification. We do not treat an anomaly as a vague embarrassment. We treat it as a structured signal that tells us where the grammar breaks first in the tri-unity. Omega time, kappa space, new motion coupling. An omega first anomaly means the timing breaks first. The rule cannot predict the rhythm, the cadence, the periodicity, the delay structure. In everyday language, The when is wrong. Picture a bus schedule. You know the route and you know the bus exists. But the arrival times drift in a repeating pattern, as if a hidden clock is interfering. Space is mostly right, motion is mostly right, but time refuses to obey. That is omega first. A kappa first anomaly means the spatial structure breaks first. The rule cannot predict where patterns form, where boundaries hold, where structure stabilizes. In everyday language, the where is wrong. Picture a river delta. You predict floods and you predict flow speed, yet the river cuts new channels where your model says it should be stable. Timing may be fine, motion may be close, but the spatial pattern refuses to match. That is kappa first. A new first anomaly means the coupling breaks first. The rule cannot predict how motion or transport actually happens. The response curve, the propagation law, the effective coupling strength. In everyday language, the how it moves is wrong. Picture heat spreading through a new material. You measure time carefully. You map space carefully. Yet, the heat spreads faster or slower than your law allows. The coupling mechanism is different. That is, new first. And then there is trilog failure, the deepest kind. It means omega, kappa, and nu cannot be made coherent together. Any attempt to fix one breaks the other two. You cannot make time, space, and motion agree under the same grammar. Trilog failure is often the signature that the grammar family is too small. It is like trying to describe a new kind of animal using only the categories fish and bird. No patch will work. You need a deeper description. This classification turns mystery into a map. If omega first, look for hidden rhythms, facelifts, delays, memory effects. If kappa first, look for geometry, topology, boundaries, hidden spatial degrees. If nu first, look for interaction laws, transport mechanisms, coupling structure. If trilog, prepare for a new grammar family. Now connect this to the Holophase discipline that keeps us honest about energy. Energy is tally. Energy is the bookkeeping summary of how phi changes inside the licensed window. Many supposed energy violations are not new physics. They are accounting mistakes. Wrong boundaries, missing couplings, misapplied scope. The shadow archive forces us to diagnose that honestly. An anomaly might read, apparent energy non-conservation in system Z. Triunity classification might show kappa first. The boundary was drawn wrong. The system was not closed. Exchange with the environment was ignored. When the boundary is corrected, the tally balances. Conclusion: not a violation of the rule, but a misuse of the rule. Another anomaly might read, persistent energy excess in a certain regime. Classification: nu first. The coupling law is wrong. The tally shows excess across instruments and representations. Conclusion: possible genuine anomaly pointing to deeper physics. The shadow archive prevents careless slogans like energy is broken without first auditing whether we applied the grammar correctly. Now we define the firewall's role here. The firewall becomes the shadow archivist. At certification time, the firewall asks, where is your shadow? If your shadow archive is empty or vague, your rule cannot be promoted. An empty shadow is not impressive. It is suspicious. It means the rule is too new, or too gently tested, or selectively reported. So the firewall audits the shadow archive for comprehensiveness. Did you test hostile regimes? Did you vary omega, kappa, and nu within and beyond scope? Did you search for cracks on purpose? It audits classification accuracy. Are anomalies honestly labeled omega first, kappa first, nu first, or trilock with evidence and context? It audits integrity. Are anomalies dismissed with hand-waving or documented with rigor? And the firewall can issue challenges. If you claim high confidence, you must submit the rule to harsher tests. Your certification depends on the shadow you build. This is how a culture learns to try to break itself. That is not cynicism. That is maturity. Now the shadow archive yields a beautiful prediction. If a rule is real and correctly scoped, then its anomalies should cluster at the boundaries, not randomly throughout. In everyday language, if the rule is honest, the cracks show up near the edges, not in the middle of the floor. If the rule claims a safe scope, an omega range, a kappa range, a nu regime, then failures should appear when you push beyond that. Too fast, too slow, too small, too large, too strongly coupled, too weakly coupled. The shadow should outline the silhouette of the rule. That is a sign of maturity. The grammar has a clear boundary. Now, the opposite is a warning and a falsification trigger. If anomalies persist inside the declared safe scope, meaning you are not pushing limits and you are still seeing repeated failure, then certification is in trouble. If the same anomaly persists across independent sensors and pipelines, the firewall responds. It may downgrade the rule's certification tier. It may narrow the scope, shrinking the omega kappa nu domain. It may trigger grammar family review, signaling that deeper revision is required. This is the firewall principle again. When a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. And we log the failure publicly. Now we make the ethics explicit. A rule can have anomalies and still be used if the anomalies are logged and the scope is honest. Unresolved anomalies are allowed as long as they are recorded and actively investigated. Independent researchers are allowed to add verified anomalies, provided they supply enough context for replication. What is forbidden is the old habit, claiming universality while keeping a stagnant or empty shadow, dismissing anomalies without documentation, blocking independent editions of verified counterexamples, treating anomaly reporting as an attack rather than a gift. The shadow archive changes the culture from ego defense to boundary mapping. It also changes what we reward. In the old culture, the hero is the one who never admits error. In the firewall culture, the hero is the one who maps the boundary honestly and makes the next discovery possible. Now let's make this concrete with examples the listener can picture. In medicine, a treatment guideline is not just works, it comes with warnings. Who should not take it, what side effects appear, what interactions break it. That is a shadow archive in practical form. A drug becomes trustworthy not because it has no failures, but because its failures are known, recorded, and managed. In engineering, a material specification is not just strength. It includes fatigue limits, temperature limits, corrosion vulnerabilities, known failure patterns. Bridges are safe because builders keep archives of cracks. Airplanes are safe because engineers keep archives of incidents. The shadow archive is the same principle applied to scientific grammar. In everyday life, even cooking uses shadow knowledge. A recipe includes warnings. Do not overheat the oil. Do not add water to boiling sugar. Do not store rice too long. The recipe becomes reliable because people remember the failures and teach them. Now see how the shadow archive interacts with rule identity and lineage. Every verified anomaly can trigger one of 4 lineage actions. First, clarification. The anomaly is resolved as misuse, and the archive records which scope condition was violated. This strengthens the label. Second, scope tightening. Repeated anomalies show the boundary was too generous, so we narrow omega or kappa or nu scope. Third, refinement. The anomaly reveals an underestimated uncertainty or a mismeasured constant, so we refine parameters and error bars. Fourth, revision. Persistent core anomalies or trilog failures force a new grammar family. A new rule identity is created. The old one is retired to a special case shelf, and the transition is documented. In this way, the shadow archive is not a graveyard. It is a nursery. It is where the next generation of rules is born. Now, consider the social benefit. The shadow archive solves an authority problem. People often treat scientific statements like decrees. If an authority says, "This is the law," ordinary people either submit blindly or reject angrily. Both reactions are unhealthy because both ignore the real structure of knowledge. It is always bounded. The shadow archive gives a third path: informed trust. You can say, "I trust this rule inside its certified scope, and I see the list of known exceptions, and I understand why those exceptions exist." That turns science from a priesthood into a transparent craft. It also gives scientists permission to speak in boundaries, not in myths. It normalizes the sentence, "Here is where we do not know yet." Now we address a practical detail. Who can add to the shadow archive? Anyone can propose an anomaly, but only verified anomalies become official entries. Verification means the observation occurred in a licensed window. Uncertainty discipline was respected. The discrepancy is reproducible or independently supported, and the report contains enough detail for others to test it. The shadow archive does not store rumors. It stores documented friction between grammar and world. When disputes arise, the firewall does not settle them by loud debate. It settles them by procedure. Reproduce, vary, audit. If an anomaly disappears under clean replication, it is marked unverified. If it persists across independent pipelines, it becomes verified and the rule must respond. This protects the registry from propaganda. It forces every contradiction to become measurable, not merely rhetorical. Now, the skill you gain in Part 55 is the skill of a curator of the unexplained. When you encounter a grand theory, do not ask first, "What does it explain?" Ask, "Where does it fail?" What are its known counterexamples? Are those failures omega first, kappa first, nu first, or trilog? Do the failures outline the declared scope, or do they infect the core? Is the shadow alive and growing, or frozen and suspiciously empty? This is critical thinking in its highest form, the search for disconfirming evidence. And here is the paradox. A theory becomes more trustworthy when it publicly admits its limits. A theory that claims perfection is fragile. A theory that shows its scars is strong. Now step back and see the complete structure we are building across these parts. We have the rule in canonical form. We have the archive record. We have certification labels for safe use. We have rule identity and lineage so versions do not blur. We have learning trajectories so discovery paths can be audited. And now we have the shadow archive, the permanent memory of failure. This is a complete epistemic organism. It breathes truth and refuses myth. The moment you hide failures, you invite dogma. The shadow archive is the firewall's antidote to dogma. It also protects the young. A student entering a field should not inherit only confidence. They should inherit boundaries. They should inherit the honest list of what we do not yet understand. That is how curiosity stays alive instead of becoming worship, and it protects the public. Communities should not hear, "We are certain about everything." They should hear, "We are certain inside this boundary and uncertain beyond it, and here is the evidence for both." Now, bring this home with a simple image you can feel. Imagine you're walking at night with a lantern. The bright circle on the ground is the region where you can step safely. The darkness beyond is unknown. A childish mind pretends the darkness does not exist. A mature mind marks the edge and says, "This is where my light ends." The shadow archive is the painted ring at the edge of the lantern's reach. It keeps you from stepping off a cliff while chanting confidence. In Afghanistan, in mountain travel, elders do the same thing. They do not only tell you the safe passes, they tell you the passes where people slipped, the slopes where snow hides ice, the river bends that swallow trucks. They are not being negative, they are keeping you alive. A community survives because it remembers where it lost people. The shadow archive is that same survival wisdom, formalized for science. So we crystallize part 55 in one clear statement. The shadow archive prevents survivorship bias, turns mystery into diagnosis, and maps the true boundary of a rule's validity. The firewall acts as the shadow archivist, demanding a living shadow as a condition for high certification. The prediction is boundary clustering. When a rule is honest and correctly scoped, its anomalies gather at the edges of that scope, like cracks near the rim of a clay pot. The warning sign is core failure. Repeated, verified anomalies inside the promised safe domain force downgrade, scope tightening, or grammar revision. The license consequence is practical. A rule without a shadow cannot be called universal, and its certification must remain provisional for engineers, educators, and policy. Now let this land as a final picture. Think of a map drawn by a careful traveler. He does not only draw the roads, he marks the landslides, the flooded crossings, the wells that went dry, the valleys where fog steals direction, and the slopes where snow blinds the eye. That is not negative thinking. That is love for the next person who will walk. A shadow archive is exactly that love, made formal. It is the gift we give to future researchers, builders, and students. The honest outline of where we slipped, where we bled, and where we still do not know. And notice something beautiful. The shadow does not weaken the rule, it strengthens it. The more a rule is used, the more its shadow grows, and the more precisely its safe boundary can be traced. Over time, the rule becomes not a vague claim, but a calibrated tool. You know when to trust it, how to apply it, and when to stop and switch to a deeper grammar. So we end part 55 with a vow. We will not hide our counterexamples. We will not bury anomalies as embarrassment. We will archive them, classify them, and keep them attached to every rule we teach. Because the truth does not fear scars. Only pride fears scars. When you study a rule, always read its shadow first. It will tell you what questions remain alive and where discovery waits for you. Finally, we look forward. We have built a firewall for truth in our civilization. But is this logic only human, or is it deeper? Could any intelligent civilization anywhere discover the same necessity? That knowledge must archive its failures to remain honest? If yes, then the shadow archive becomes a bridge between worlds, a universal language of humility that says, here is what we know, and here is where our knowing ends. Because if we can archive failures, we can communicate honestly. And if we can communicate honestly, we can build a science that survives time. Salam and peace be upon you.